we wanted to do this project was to open up a community for each of you, so you get to meet more like-minded young people like yourselves and develop new skills. So really try and embrace all the classes and have a lot of fun. So on that note, we thought no better person than to start this fantastic project with than the amazing Ivor Baddiel. Ivor, do you want to give us a wave?
Hello.
Hello.
Everyone hear me? Everyone hear me?
Hello.
Thumbs up if you hear me.
Hello.
Cinemagic is so honoured to have Ivor for our first session. He has just worked on so many amazing things with the most incredible people. I'm not going to tell you about any of that because Ivor will, but tonight's going to be a lot of fun. So everyone just relax, give yourselves a shake, and please just really, really enjoy tonight.
So, does everyone know that show? Just again, it's the X Factor. I'm hoping that most people know that show. Yeah, I can't see all of you, but I'm assuming if you don't know it, it's a show called the X Factor. It's a big singing talent show that's it used to be very popular. It's not quite so popular now, but it was very popular. So that little clip there, the host of the show is a chap called Dermot O'Leary, who again many of you may know. I want you to be honest now. You might know the answer to this, but if I asked you this question yesterday, just put your hands up. When he came out on stage and he started talking, he started saying some words. Hands up. How many people think he's just sort of making that up, or he's just sort of saying roughly what he wants to? How many people might think that? Maybe thought that. There's one there. I can't see everybody. There's a few, yeah, one or two people. Okay, I mean that's actually quite good. Usually when I talk about this, a lot of people think that Dermot just comes out and he sort of roughly knows what to say, but he's kind of just making it up as he goes along and, says whatever he likes. I can absolutely 100% assure you that's not the case. With a show like X Factor and just about every other show on television, there is a script. There is a full script that has been written for him, and it's actually the words. And also you might have noticed at one point he walked out on the center of the stage, and then at one point he moved over to stage right, and even that little direction is planned and rehearsed. I mean, all of these things are written and rehearsed and prepared. But in terms of the script, would you believe it, I am lucky enough to be the person who writes the script. In fact, I've written on about, I don't know, I think I've done 11 or 12 X Factors working with Dermot, and I've done a lot of other shows which I'll talk to you about. I've ended up doing quite a lot of sort of reality shows. I've worked on I'm a Celebrity, I've worked on Dancing on Ice. I've also done a lot of award shows. So I've done the film BAFTAs and the television BAFTAs. I've done the National Television Awards. So quite a lot of, I've been lucky enough to work on quite a lot of big entertainment shows. I've done some scripted shows and some other stuff as well. So I'm a writer, but I suppose the main bit of writing I do is television script writing. Believe it or not, I didn't want to be a writer when I was younger. Now, I know a lot of young people, I still don't really know what I want to do when I grow up. But when I was 12 or 13, I thought I did know. I wanted to be Sigmund Freud. I wanted to be the next great psychologist. I was fascinated by human beings and human behavior. And I thought, yeah, I want to be a psychologist. I want to be a great psychologist with insights into the human mind and all that sort of thing. And I actually remember 2 or 3 years later, I didn't even know that it was a thing you could study. But I remember a place called Aston, just outside Birmingham, Aston University. They had a course called Behavioural Sciences. And for the first time in my life, I thought, wow, you can actually study this stuff. And then I did end up went to Manchester Polytechnic and studied psychology. I have a degree in psychology, and I love it as a subject. It's fascinating, and I'm still fascinated by it. My brother is a comedian. He's quite a successful comedian, but around that same sort of time, he was just starting out. So he was going to comedy clubs and doing stand-up comedy. And obviously as his brother, I'm his older brother by about 1.5 years, I was going along and, enjoying his comedy and watching him and supporting him. And after a while, I sort of realized I'm not really a performer. I don't, it takes a lot of guts to get up there and do stand-up comedy. But I thought, maybe I can write some of this stuff for other people. So as luck would have it, there was somebody I knew who wanted to try some stand-up comedy, and I wrote with her for that couple of months, we got together and we wrote a sort of, at the time, just 5 minutes of stand-up comedy. Now that doesn't sound like very much, but actually it is. It's quite a lot. You know, in those days, that was when you went to a comedy club, you got a 5-minute open spot if you were lucky. And in that 5 minutes, you've got to try and prove yourself so that hopefully the person running the club will say, okay, you can come back next time, maybe do 10 minutes and this time I might pay you. So in that 5 minutes of stand-up comedy is a lot to write and to write it well. And we had no real idea because neither of us had ever really done it before. Anyway, we did it. She went to a comedy club and and people laughed. You know, not everything was great. It's a learning process, but it wasn't terrible. She did well enough for us to think, okay, we can carry on with this. So we did carry on with it, and I wrote for her for a little while. Then I wrote for someone else for a while, and you know, gradually was getting better and better at it. And eventually, I thought, you know what, I quite like this writing lark. I'm gonna try and give it a bit more of a go. So what you have to do in the beginning, or what I did, is I wrote 2 whole articles. One of them was for a Jewish magazine, because I'm Jewish, that was around at the time. And the other one was for a football magazine, because I love football. And in there's a sort of lesson, which a fairly obvious lesson, but if you're going to write, certainly for magazines, it's best to write about what you know and what you're interested in. So I wrote these 2 articles. I wrote the whole thing from start to finish, and I sent them off to these 2 magazines. Thankfully, they liked them, and they both got back to me and said, okay, yeah, we like these magazines, we'll publish them. So that's fantastic. That's brilliant. You've got your foot in the door, right? So now they know, they've seen some of your stuff, they know you, they know you a little bit, they kind of think, okay, this guy's not too bad a writer. So then what I did, essentially, once you've got your foot in the door, you hit them with like 10 ideas. So I can't remember what they were, but I went back to both magazines and said, okay, you've published, you like that article, how about these ideas, these 10 ideas? And then it gets really scary, because then if they say, and as they did, they say yes to, okay, we want this one, number 3 on your list, we want that. Suddenly I found that very scary, because now they're putting their faith in you, they trust you, right? They think, okay, this guy can write, there's an idea, and the idea is like a line, 2 lines, now go away and do it. But scary as it is, you sort of overcome it, or I overcame it, and I wrote the article, and gradually, it was, you know, getting more and more articles accepted by the magazines, and I started writing for other magazines as well. But this was a daily show at 12:30. It was live. And live television is very, very exciting, and there's nowhere to hide because it is live. And being comedians, they would start the show with 2 or 3 minutes of topical jokes about that day's news. So basically what would happen was, and this was all a sort of fairly new world to me, but I got picked up in a car at 6 in the morning, and then actually they picked up Mel, and then they picked up Sue. So all 3 of us were in the same car. We got taken to the studio. Mel and Sue would go off to makeup and hair and whatever, and I would be taken to a desk, and there was a huge pile of newspapers, all the newspapers there. And they would say, right, by 9 o'clock, we want 10 minutes of topical jokes about the day's news. And believe you me, that's when 7 o'clock in the morning, that's hard. It's still hard. I'm not going to pretend it would be easy now. It'll probably be harder now, because I'm probably more tired at 7 in the morning. But so by 9 o'clock, I'd go and see Mel and Sue, and I'd say, look, here's what I've written. And I'm sure a lot of it was rubbish, but somehow in there was enough jokes that they liked, or that, you know, they could work with, or they could change them or whatever, for them not to fire me. And then as the show went on, it was a very successful show at the time. I was the only writer on the first series, but as it got more successful, they brought in other writers, and by the end there was a whole team of us. And it was great. It was really, really good fun and very, very enjoyable to do. And it was a really good learning process for me. So the great thing about Light Lunch, it was a live show every single day of the week. There were 5 shows, and that meant 5 different production teams. So 5 different producers, 5 different assistant producers, 5 different teams. And so when the show finished, all those people went off and did other jobs, were looking for other work in television. So that's a lot of people that I'd got to know over in fact, it was like 2 years that the show ran. I mean, there were breaks, obviously, but but that's a lot of people I know who are going off into the world of television, producers and what have you, trying to get other, hoping to get other work. And when they do, if the show they're working on needs a writer, hopefully they'll remember me and give me a call, which is essentially what happened. Somebody else who worked on the show ended up producing another show that needed a writer, and they remembered him. They remembered me and thought, well, he was okay. He wasn't too bad. Let's ring him. And so they'd call me, and then I'd be working on another show. One person who was a runner on Light Lunch, believe it or not, was Dermot O'Leary. Right? That's where he started in television. He became a runner. He was a runner on Light Lunch. And then there's a sort of career for producers. After a runner, you become a researcher, and then an assistant producer, and you work your way up. So I think he also became a researcher. And if I'm absolutely honest with you, at the time he was going off to auditions and trying to become a presenter, and he would say, oh, I'm going to be a presenter one day, and us writers would go, yeah, shut up and make us the tea. Right? But as you well know, he was successful and became a presenter. And a few years down the line, probably 6 or 7 years down the line, he hosted a show called the UK Music Hall of Fame, because he's very into his music, Dermot, as you may or may not know. And I got a call to work on that show. And I hadn't seen him then for about 3 or 4 years, I don't think. But we obviously knew each other from Light Lunch, and we got on incredibly well. And more importantly, we worked very well together, and the show did very well. And I think they did another one the following year. And it all went very well. And then another couple of years go by. And of course, again, as you may know, Dermot got the job of being the host of the X Factor. And if I'm absolutely honest, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, well, if they need a writer, maybe they'll call me. And they did call me. And that was, I don't know when that was, but I've done 11, 12, maybe 13 series with Dermot. And actually, I'm his writer for things for television. Essentially, if Dermot needs a writer on television, bless him, he asks for me. And in a way, that's kind of one of the ways. That's what happens with writers. In what I do, sometimes you get attached to talent, they call it. You're their favourite writer or someone they like working with or whatever. So if talent or celebrity or whatever is hired to do a show that needs a writer, the producer will say, is there anybody you like working with? And in Dermot's case, as I say, bless him, he'll say me, and there are a couple of others. So that's one way that you kind of get repeat work. So that's how I have ended up writing on the X Factor.
I was wondering how, because obviously the X Factor does go out live in the live shows, what's the line of spontaneity when you're writing something? So obviously it's got to appear off the cuff. So how much, is there a certain amount that you can't overwork a joke after 10, 15 minutes of chewing it? Are you okay, right, if we fiddle with this too much, it won't come across natural? Or does that sort of purify it and actually get it closer to something that would appear natural?
That's a very, very good question. I'm trying to think of a bit. Well, I'll be honest with you. What happens quite a lot with Dermot, and the reason I'm being honest about this is because I listened to a radio show a while ago, and this has been going on for years. It's, as you well know, pretty much the first time you hear a joke, if you like it, it's that's the best time. As you say, by the 8th, 9th, 10th time you hear it, it's just not funny anymore, right? And Dermot is such a hard worker. He really works. I mean, I'm going to go into how the X Factor works, but there's rehearsing. I'll talk about the script in a minute. But yes, often, after the 6th, 7th, 8th time of reading a script and saying a joke, he will lose faith in it, right? And actually, I was listening to the late Terry Jones of Monty Python fame. He went in something like 1984, I think it was, around in the 80s. He was on Desert Island Disc, which you may or may not know. He was being interviewed, and he started off as a writer, and he talked about exactly the same problem on a show in the 60s or something like that. And it is quite a common thing. But I say to Dermot, and the genius of comedians, and I've seen a lot of comedians when they're on the comedy circuit, they're going around the country, they more or less do the same 20 minutes every single night, right? And that's fine because they're going around the country, they're going to different clubs. There may be one or two people or whatever who've seen it before, but for the most part, the people in the audience have not seen it. So part of the skill, to me, the most important thing if you're going to do comedy is the delivery. Right? You can have the best joke in the world. If you don't deliver it correctly, if you get the timing wrong, if you're nervous, if there's maybe some other problem, no matter what joke it is, it won't land. It won't. People won't laugh. But the other side of the coin is you've got to, you're telling that joke. Sometimes I've known comedians who do 3 shows a night. Like they'll go from one club to another club to another club, and they could be doing that 6-7 nights a week. So they've told that joke countless times in months over the years or whatever. So part of the skill of being a comedian is to make that joke sound like fresh. Because to the audience, you've got to make it sound like it's the first time you've told it, because it's the first time they've heard it. If you tell it in a sort of, oh God, I'm sick of this joke, it's certainly not going to land, right? So, and Dermot isn't a comedian. He's a presenter. So, and he can do jokes, he can do humour, he can do gags, but he does, and it's a problem. He does sort of think, oh, after a while, no, this joke's no good anymore. And I have to sometimes say to him, look, think about your reaction when you first read it. That's what you've got to hold in your mind, and it's difficult. It's a difficult skill, but as I say, it is part of the skill of telling a joke.
As you said, you work very closely with Dermot. Is it really hard to flick between, so say if you're so tied to him and you've been working for years, is it hard to flick between different hosts who all talk and act in their own way? Well,
that's, again, a very good question. I'm not very good at giving myself praise, right? But actually, one of the things I seem to be able to do is get into people's voices, if you like. So I wrote a lot for Stephen Fry. I used to do the film BAFTAs, and he was the host for 11 or 12 years. And I'll be honest with you, the first time I did it, I was absolutely terrified. If you know Stephen Fry, he's a genius. He's one of the funniest people in the world. He's got a incredible CV, if you like. And the first time I did it, I was absolutely terrified. And I remember giving in the script and thinking, well, if he keeps in one of these jokes, I'll be happy. And thankfully, he kept in a few. But despite that, I can hear his voice very, very clearly. And in fact, Dermot is slightly harder to grasp because he's not quite as distinct. But in some ways, I think I sort of seem to be able to do that, to hear people's sort of voices in my head and think, well, that's a joke that Stephen might do, or I'm trying to think. I write stuff for Amanda Holden, Philip Schofield. I've written for Julian Clary. I could sort of. That's part of what you need to do. You're sort of, I'm not writing for myself. These are not necessarily jokes that if I was going to perform, I would say. But it's a big part of that type of job. You have to be able to do that. What I said to you earlier on about Dermot not just making the words up. So nothing is really left to chance in television. So if you go down on the far left, it's the sequence numbers. So sequence 1 is, as when we were watching it before, if you know X Factor, there's the titles, there's the X going through the screen and the planet. So there's all the titles and the aerial shot of Wembley, and you go across. And these bits don't really apply to me. But if you look at the timing, everything is very, very tightly timed. It tells you, exactly what time we're on air, how long that this bit lasts for. I think that's 2 minutes. So it's 2 minutes for the pre-titles. And then we get Dermot's entrance. So this is where I sit down with the producer, and actually for most of the series, it was a he. So he will talk me through this bit. And as you may or may not know, so the X Factor shows, they often have a theme. So he'll tell me what the theme is. He'll give me any notes about last week, anything that we need to put into the show. And then, as you saw on the clip, so Dermot will set up the show, introduce the show, usually talk about the theme, and then we link to the judges. Now, X Factor is not a comedy show, but more often than not, when we link to the judges, we're allowed to have a bit of fun and we can make a joke. So there's an opportunity for humour. So the running orders are fairly similar, but that's the first thing I'll do. I'll sit down with the producer, the executive producer, and go through that. He'll tell me anything I need to know. And then I go off and I write a first draft of the script. That normally takes me to sort of mid-afternoon on the Wednesday. And then, bless him, Dermot comes in usually. Often he buys me lunch, which is very nice of him. And we sit together, we go through the script, and actually we have a very good relationship, working relationship. And it's important to be able to not be too precious. So if he doesn't like something, it's fine. I mean, he's the person up there on screen who's saying these words. I'm not going to say to him, you have to say that. Sometimes if I really like a line or a joke, I'll say, no, trust me, this is good. And we have a little fight about it or whatever. But ultimately, he's the person out there. So if he really doesn't want to say something, I'm not going to force him to say something he doesn't want to say. And also, if he doesn't believe in it and he doesn't want to say it, he's not going to deliver it well. It's not going to sound good. So, but we go through it together. He makes his suggestions and his comments. And then essentially we rewrite the script. Then the executive producer comes in, and to an extent, writers are sort of like the naughty boys and girls of television in a way, because we try and get away with stuff that maybe we shouldn't do. But executive producer, has other agendas, and he or she will go through the script and say, no, you can't say that. No, you're not allowed to say that. No, I don't want you to say that, or that's too long, or whatever. So they have a look at the script, and then I take notes and I rewrite it again. So by the end of that day, usually we have a script that Dermot has been through and the executive producer has been through, and they're hopefully reasonably happy with it. But that's just Wednesday. This is a printout. So after the show's finished, we can get a printout of the autocue script. So this is the final script that was actually used on the night. I'll sort of read through it. So as you can see, so Dermot, your Saturday night starts right here was his sort of catchphrase thing. But in this case, we made it slightly different. Welcome to the X Factor. We're live on ITV, and your Saturday night Diva special starts right here. So what he's done there is basically tell you right from the start what the theme of the show is. And you can see there was some finger clicking thing that he was meant to do. I can't remember that. So obviously there's an audience reaction there. And then as well as words for him, there's instructions for him as well. So it says turn camera 3. So he knows every camera, there's about 9 cameras, maybe more. They've all got different numbers. So he knows camera 3. At that point, he's maybe looking at camera 1, and then he turns to look at camera 3 and says, yes, tonight's theme is Divas of Legend. We're talking musical goddesses like Whitney, Adele, and Aretha Franklin, all the way through to legends like Freddie Mercury and Michael Jackson. It's a huge name with huge voices. And if you add huge egos into the mix, well, it sounds a lot like 4 people we know pretty well. Hang on a second, it's the X Factor judges. So there, as I mentioned, is chance for a little bit of humour. It's not a punchline, it's not a gag, but it's just a chance to have a little bit of humour when we introduce the judges. And then the judges come on. We can read on, let's read on a little bit. In fact, clearly in this case, Nicole did a performance, Nicole Scherzinger. So she had a performance, and then, so there Dermot will ad-lib a little bit. So he'll probably say, wow, Nicole Scherzinger, fantastic, let's hear it one more time for her. And then he'll go, kicking off Diva Week, and show them how it's done, our very own Nicole Scherzinger. So that's her send-off. Then great stuff. Glad we pulled her name out of the hat when deciding which judge was going to sing tonight. So obviously that's a gag. So again, there are chances for a little bit of humour. In this series, one of my notes from the executive producer would be, right, let's just mention the theme straight away. Tell them what the theme is right from the start. So we've obviously done that. And now we're into sort of, by now Simon Cowell has said we want to make sure that people know there's a competition, there's a lot at stake. Big shot last weekend. So here's what I want you to do. I want you guys to write an introduction to the X Factor. Okay? You can choose your own theme. And the important thing to remember, by the way, all of that is very, very short. So you can't write, I don't write huge long essays because it's all got to be, as I said, very tightly timed. So what you need to do is do a big introduction, talk about, you can say it's halfway through the competition, it's up to you. It could be the final, it's entirely up to you, right? So you've got a sense of how competitive it is. They all want to win, but it's really tough. One mistake and they could be going home, that type of thing. Okay, introduce your theme. It can be anything, rock, disco, movies. We have big band night, or it can be anything, any theme you like. And then link the theme, if you can, to introducing the judges.
Welcome to your Saturday night at the theatre, musical theatre that is. We'll meet those who yearn for some aspect of love and learn the darkest desires of the greedy and wicked. Yes, anything goes tonight. And who better to start your night than the cast of Les Miserables? Oh wait, it's the X Factor judges.
Oh,
Very
nice.
Cheesy, I know.
No, I like the Les Miserables line. You focus. That's good. That's very good. You focus very much on the theme, which is fine. I didn't in there. There wasn't really a sense of it being a competition anywhere in there before we got to introducing the judges. But I like that's a funny line, saying Les Miserables to the judges. That's a good funny line. Well done. I mean, just as a little point, the language, you try and make it as punchy as possible. So you'd never say, for example, if you know what I mean. That's much more of a thing you put in writing. But it's, this sort of thing is very punchy. So the judges are all dressed up. We've got Simon Cowell, who's even more villainous as Cruella de Vil. We've got, so it'd be much, much punchier.
I went for like a fantasy kind of Game of Thrones theme to mine. So I went, so here it is, here's the final. Everyone from north, south, east and west, contestants all fighting for their place, but only one can sit in the throne. Just over that wall is the final and a whole wave of your votes for them to win over. But is that a White Walker I see coming? No, it's just Simon Cowell and the rest of the X Factor judges.
Nice, really nice. I like the theme, and again, you work the theme into the, the sense of competition and building to the judges. So yes, I think that's really nice.
Welcome to the X Factor. We are live, and your Saturday night starts right here. With the shocking turn of events last week, it's clear that no one is safe. Our contestants will have to be big and bold because it's Big Band Week. Ah yes, trumpets, horns, cymbals and drums. These performances are sure to be almost as loud and brash as our X Factor judges.
Well, that's magnificent. Excellent. That's really good, Ashley. Well done. That's really nice. Again, you got the sense of competition, big show, used it to introduce the judges. Cracking.
Hello and welcome to the X Factor. Saturday night's all right. Well, hopefully not for fighting. Grab your flares and lava lamp. It's 70s week, and here are 4 of the grooviest cats around, the X Factor judges.
Lovely, lovely, lovely. What I like about that is the Saturday night's all right for fighting reference is a 70s reference, obviously. I believe it's a 70s song, isn't it? It probably is.
Elton John, yeah.
Yeah. So you've actually, that's really nice to use that reference. In a way, people are sort of having to think a little bit about that. Which, as I said earlier, I really like. That's nice. That's very, very nice. Well done. And was it Cameron? Was that the other one?
Yep, Cameron is the last one. So Cameron, if you want to go ahead.
Yep. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the X Factor. Wow, it's finally here, the finals. We had one amazing roller coaster, didn't we? Well, since we now only have 2 finalists, this roller coaster's coming to its final loop, and they're ready to light up everyone's world with rock and roll.
Nice. Very, very nice. I like the rock and roll theme. And I got a sense of competition there. That was the sense of competition came through very well. So that's very, very nice. Thank you, Cameron. Well done. I wanted to talk a little bit. I've been doing it a long time. Writing I love it. I'm very lucky to do what I do. It's a great job. I'm not going to suggest, I don't know everything at all. I'm not going to suggest there are rules to writing, but I just wanted to sort of go through a few little tips, if you like, things that have helped me, okay, in my writing. So, and sort of the actual process. So the first one is a very odd thing that I discovered relatively early on, but it's to tell yourself that no one is watching, right? And that might sound a bit obvious and a bit odd, but in the first instance, when you're writing your first draft, wherever it is, even if it's in an office or at home or wherever it might be, sometimes you just can't start or you get stuck or whatever. And I sometimes, still today, I find if you actively say to yourself, look, it doesn't matter. Nobody is watching. I can write whatever rubbish I like. It doesn't really matter. at all at this point, right? And that, to actually actively tell yourself that, sometimes I just do it. Sometimes I'm stuck and I tell myself that and I just start writing any old rubbish. And it just kind of gets you going. It just breaks the block and it helps. And, you know, whatever I do actually write, it might be okay, it might be rubbish. There might be one line, one word, one joke in there that's okay. But it just kind of gets you going. The second thing is this notion of creativity. And people will sometimes ask, where do you get your ideas from? And, you know, where does the creativity come from? And I remember years ago being at, I think it was a wedding or something, and I was sat next to this 70-year-old man. I told him what I did, and he said to me, "Oh, do you know what? I don't think I've ever had a creative thought in my life." Right? And I thought that was heartbreaking, right? And actually, and also I didn't believe him. What I think about creativity is it's to do with access of creativity. Everybody is creative in different ways. Everybody has creativity going on in there somewhere, right? But it's how you get it out of there, right? And that's essentially what I think I do when I'm writing. And there are lots of different ways. I mean, there's no set way. People have different ways, but it's kind of, you know, asking yourself questions, challenging things, seeing things a different way. Writing a gag, if I was to break it down, that's kind of, you have your central topic. So with a, it's difficult now because the main thing in the news is the pandemic, and you can't really make jokes about that. But if there was, you know, something relatively funny going on in the news, you take that. That's like almost like a mind map. That's your central topic, and you can shoot off from that. How many connections can you make from that? Think of it. What questions can you ask about it? Why did this happen? What happened? What if I thought about this a different way? What does that make me think about? So there are all sorts of different connections that can shoot off in different directions, and then think, oh, that's quite a funny idea, right? And so then you stick with that idea and follow it along. And in a way, just asking yourself those questions and trying to open up those avenues in your mind can help you be creative, I guess. Okay, the other thing is this is a platitude, but unfortunately it's true, that certainly with a lot of bigger scripts that I've written, slightly less so with the X Factor, but it's also true that you may have heard this expression, it's 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration, right? I don't know if you've heard that expression, but with other stuff that I've done, I've written some books and some scripts and whatever, I'm sure a lot of you have had that moment where you've had that, wow, I've got a great idea. To go from that to a finished book is such hard work, or a finished script or finished film, whatever it might be, right? That inspiration will only take you so far, right? There's no getting away from it. It's work. It's hard work. And particularly, I know you guys are going to be writing film scripts later on. I mean, it's going to be fun, but it's, you know, you've got to work at it. You've got to, you know, challenge yourselves, and it's not going to, nobody sits down and writes a whole film, a whole script like that. It takes a long time, and, you know, there's no getting away from it. You have to work hard, but that's not a bad thing. But as I say, the inspiration will only get you so far. The inspiration should give you that push to go, yeah, I love this idea, now let's do it. And often, you know, you sit down and you think, oh, now what do I do? So that's when you've got to slow down and the work's got to start. Or sometimes the inspiration keeps you going. You write 3, 4, 5, 6 pages, and then you think, oh, hang on. But you know that always happens, and then you need to carry on working and get over that. So yes, there is a lot of work. It is hard work.
I was just wondering if you made any like mistakes in the industry. Sorry if that comes across negative, but in terms of like, if you ever make a mistake in the industry and how you kind of bounce back from that and kind of dealt with that, I suppose. Obviously that's the last thing you really want to be doing, but I'm just kind of thinking, how do you bounce back from that?
Yes, that's a very, very good question. I mean, well, my first thought, there were two things there, sort of whether you think it's a mistake or whether it's perceived as a mistake. I remember years ago working on a show, it was called, I mean, I've told you I love football. It was a football show on Sky called The Match. And the first series I did went very well. And the second series, it was actually a different production team, and I wasn't particularly, you know, I didn't really get on that well with people, but I remember being in a meeting with the hosts, reading the script and the executive, you know, a whole table of people. One of the hosts read a bit of the script, a link that I'd written, and this particular executive producer just went, "That's rubbish," right, in front of everybody. And it's really difficult. You know, inside I'll be honest, you're sort of crushed. But I sort of tried to make a joke out of it. And that's what I was talking about the sort of building up that rhino hide. You can either just, you know, in any job, in any walk of life, you're going to have that. And it's, you know, it's how you bounce back. You know, he was particularly harsh. There were, you know, it would have been better. And most people will say, yeah, I'm not sure that line is working. Could we rethink it? That would have been a better way to say it. But that was the way he did it. And yes, it was very, very tough. And he was probably right. I think he probably was right. It was a mistake. But from what I can't remember very well, but I did bounce back from it. And, you know, it didn't destroy me too much. But it can also be very rewarding. I mean, honestly, I can't tell you how much I love it. If a joke I write works, I think I get as much pleasure out of it as the performer does. I absolutely love it. In fact, I can go back to the BAFTAs. I wrote, me and the other writer, we wrote a thing for Russell Crowe and Hugh Jackman one year at the BAFTAs. Because basically the presenter, as I'm sure you know, each award has presenters. So the main host of the show says, okay, now it's time for the award for Best Director. And to present it, here's Russell Crowe and Hugh Jackman. And they come out and whoever it is, they say something. So we'd written a joke, or, well, a little sketchy thing for them. And it brought the house down. I was so happy. So, you know, there are good moments as well. So, yeah, but the mistakes sort of counterbalance them. I'm very much about story. I like to get the story right first. I've got a friend who's a drama writer, and he told me when he does this sort of thing, he works on the characters first. So he will spend months and months and months really working on these characters. So he knows them so well. So he's a crime writer, writes crime television shows. And so he said once he knows the characters really, really well, he'll then put them in a situation like they find a dead body or they come on a crime scene or whatever. And because he knows them so well, he kind of knows then how they would react and what would happen. So that's how he does it. And that's kind of how important character is. If you're doing more of a campaigning type documentary film, like the Y Word, then you really have to think about the script and the best way to get your message across. And you need to think about making it as succinct as possible. You know, you haven't got very long people. In this day and age, people's attention span is very, very short, as I'm sure you know. So if you're doing a short 1.5, 2 minute film and you've got an important message, you've really got to work on that script and think, what's the best way I can get this message across in the short amount of time? And that's, again, not easy, but it's nothing to be scared of. You will get there. And I would say that first draft, when you're on your own or whatever, just get it down. Just write whatever you want, because, in fact, I'll maybe finish with this. I'm not a big fan of Stephen King. Do you know who Stephen King is? Yeah, he's probably one of the most successful authors in the world. And I'm not a huge fan of his, but he wrote a book called On Writing years ago, which I read. And as I said, because he's such a successful writer, I'm not a particular fan of the horror genre which he writes, but I just thought this is a hugely successful writer. I'm going to be interested to hear what he says. And he said lots of things, but one of the things he said with stories, that he treats them like archaeological finds. So when you're digging underground and you find this, well, you might not even know what it is, but let's say it's a jug or something, and to begin with, it's just covered in mud and earth and layers and layers and layers. And gradually, you chip away at it, and eventually you bring it back to its original beauty. And he said that's how he thinks of stories. And I think that's really useful, that to begin with, you just write it, get it all down, it doesn't really matter. And then you've got it there, you've got the story, you've got the outline, whatever it is, you've got it down on paper, and then you can start editing, making it better, changing it, adding bits, taking bits away, and honing it down to hopefully a perfection, whatever that means. Nothing is perfect, obviously, but to a point where you think, yeah, this is really, really good. But to begin with, just go for it, just get it down and don't worry about it to start with.
Ivor, you have been absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing so much about your whole career journey. Has been fantastic. And what I love about that the most is it's okay to always be figuring out what you want to do. And you know, we all put ourselves under so much pressure, thinking I've got to have it all figured out at 20, at 25, at 30. And to me, life's about the journey. It's like, you know, what you're saying, that you try teaching, and you give this a go, and you give that a go, and you've been hugely successful, and that's because you've been brave enough to change your journey and to try new things. So thank you very much for sharing all of that, and for giving such an insight into your job, and the fact that, you know, all these fantastic presenters have writers, and how it works. And as you say, like, things change, especially, you know, with Dermot, when judges say something they're not going to know, you know, you can't plan for everything. So honestly, thank you so much for sharing all of that. And well done to all you guys for being here, and also for those who give it a go. You were great. It was really, really good to see that. So see you on Wednesday now. We'll have to get you all doing more things and different things. But as I hope you've all enjoyed it. And I look forward to seeing you again on Wednesday. And if we just all give a big kind of virtual clap to Ivor and say thank you so much. Woo!
Cheers, Ivor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You've been a lovely audience. Lovely audience.